side of things. So you will notice that you'll get a little pop-up on your screen. The session is being recorded, and you will be able to access the recording and all of Adam's materials afterwards, just in case we forget anything on that end. Before I kick things off, I want to respectfully acknowledge the lands that all three campuses are on. This is a partnership with SFU's Vancouver campus, Surrey campus, and Health and Counseling Services. So our campuses lie on the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, Katsitsi, Kwantlen. There's a whole list here, Semiahmoo and Tsawwassen peoples whose traditional territories are resided on these campuses. I don't know where everyone is. You might be around the province as well, working from home, but hopefully you're enjoying this beautiful sunny day that I have here in Surrey, BC. So before we kick things off, I wanted to let you know if you would like to use the closed captioning feature, you can do so by clicking the CC button on the bottom of your screen. If you have questions for Adam, you can raise your hand or put them in the chat box. I will be helping him throughout, and he'll kind of take a peek at those on that end of things. And as well, all of our PowerPoints will be available afterwards. They'll send you an email, and the resources we used before will also be available. So we'll give those off to you. So without further ado, I welcome our registered physiotherapist, Adam Chin. He is a physiotherapist at City Sports, which is downtown. And you may have seen him before. He's been at a previous wellness day and done a workshop for us. So we're really, really excited that you're back and are ready to learn.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for having me. I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen here. So let's get that done first. Good. Perfect. Okay, you guys can see that okay? Awesome. All right. Yeah, well, thank you very much for having me. Welcome to Fit to Play, our home workout edition. Like I was saying, we've done one of these before and focused a lot on, desk ergonomics and setup and some, movement strategies around sitting all day when the pandemic all kind of initially started. So today we're going to kind of follow up on that theme and progress into a few other things. So my name is Adam. I work at City Sport and Physiotherapy. We are located downtown Vancouver, not too far from the SFU campus, just on Pender here. And we treat all sorts of things, not just sports injuries, general population. We've been seeing a lot of, neck pain, back pain, things like that since people have been shifted to working from home. So we kind of work with a little bit of everything. My personal background is, before I kind of transitioned into physio, I did a lot of personal training and work as a kinesiologist. And so I'm really hoping today to kind of blend some of that world. I've kind of been on both sides of the injury side, but also the other side, and give you guys some tools to hopefully prevent some injuries, but B, keep moving and feeling good throughout the day as you get into your, running or your home workouts or what else you're doing throughout your time here. So what we'll kind of be covering today, we'll start with kind of just a quick review of some of our strategies to help optimize our workspace and set up our workstation at home or at the office, wherever you end up being. From there, we're going to go through a few stretches, touch on some things in terms of injury risk and reducing that, and then go through a bit of like a mobility flow. And we'll definitely make sure that we leave a little bit of time for questions at the end, so that if you do have questions, you can kind of ask them then. But by all means, if you want to stop me throughout this presentation and ask a question, I'm really open to that. I want to keep this as kind of much as a bit of like a discussion and kind of just a roundtable talk as we can. So please either raise your hand, pop it in the chat box, or if you feel comfortable, turn on your mic, turn on your video, and you can ask the question that way. All right. So actually, before we get started, any questions before we kind of start off here? Okay, perfect. So first of all, why we're kind of doing this, obviously we've seen a kind of a drastic shift in how we've been working. during the last year and a half now. And so, changes in environment and things like that have definitely led to people dealing with new pains, new aches, and things that they might have not experienced prior. And so the goal of my talk today is really to help create a work environment that is going to try to limit some of those aches and pains, as well as give you some education and some guidance on different kind of movement strategies and mobility work to keep things feeling good throughout the day and as things go through. Perfect. So let's start here. So first off, we've got kind of our 6 steps. So these, again, might be a little bit of a review for some people, but kind of the areas you want to touch are adjusting the chair height, adjusting the chair back, what's my posture like in that chair, where are my wrist angles, where's my upper body and arms, what's my environment set up like, and then how can I get some more movement into my day. Perfect. So adjusting the chair height. So what this kind of looks like is making sure that our body's positioned relative to the desk in a way that's going to be most ideal. Now, typically what we want to do is start by setting up our arms so that they're approximately 90 degrees by your side, and that can kind of reach your keyboard there. Now, the kind of problems you'll run into, especially at home if you don't have as much adjustability, is that the chair you're using is too low and you can't get those arms parallel, or vice versa, the chair is too high and again, can't get those arms parallel. Sometimes you might get the fact where you can get the arms okay, but now the desk you're on is too low, or the kitchen table you're on is too low, and your knees are kind of bumping there, and that doesn't work. And so kind of the biggest things I would say for that is we want to try to, if we can, adjust the upper body in that arm position first, and then make things fit accordingly. So if, for example, if your chair is too low and you can't actually bring it up, you can try adding a cushion, a couple pillows on your chair, something like that to bring your seat up. If it's too high and you actually can't reach the desk, you can try adding maybe a couple books or something under your kitchen table, under the legs, to bring the desk up that way. So just a few things there to try to troubleshoot what you've got, work with what you've got, sorry, and get that position in the most ideal setup we can. And so the next thing we want to do is adjust the chair back. So, depending on what kind of chair you have, you might have a fixed back versus a relaxed back. And so we want it in a comfortable position, right? So approximately, 90 degrees, maybe a little bit lean back. From there, if you can lock in your chair, you want to lock it in. And if you can't, then that is okay. Sorry, I'm just kind of taking a quick look through the chat here. Okay, yeah, we'll talk on that a little bit. So with, again, kind of taking back to the chair back here, we want to kind of lock it in there, and then we want to make sure that we're using the chair back, right? So you can see kind of in the picture here that the person is leaned forward, not actually resting against the chair back at all. And from there, we're not really using that chair back to help support the lower back. And so throughout the day, that can mean that we're kicking on the muscles in around the core a lot more, and it can lead to the more strain through the lower back. When it comes to exercise bowls as an option for chairs, I wish I could have a kind of a black and white answer for you, but it kind of depends. Typically on what you have going on. So an exercise ball is great because it does allow you to wiggle a little bit more, fidget a bit more, change your position. You are kicking on those core muscles a lot more. But because you don't have any backrest at all, it is kind of like sitting on a stool for the entire workday, and that can really lead to a bit more fatigue in the lower back muscles and some of the postural muscles. I'd say if you are going to make that switch, or you want to make a bit of that switch, definitely doing it gradually is going to be kind of the key. I wouldn't go from using a chair for your 8-hour day to using a ball for your 8-hour day. You're probably going to feel a lot more tight and sore through there as you're making that adjustment. So maybe you do just like you want to stand and break up your day, maybe you switch your chair out once an hour or something like that, and you kind of go back and forth. until you've built up the stamina and strength there. Okay, perfect. All right, and so then posture-wise, these are the kind of big things that I'm hoping that by now, like a lot of people have already started to make the switch, got some monitors, got a portable keyboard, an actual mouse, and hopefully aren't working as much just off their laptops anymore. But if you are, here's some kind of things that we want to do to make this setup more optimal. And again, they kind of apply whether you have a laptop or not. So screen position, we want to make sure that we can look straight ahead at the center of our screen. And so that might mean raising it on some books, on a laptop stand, or if you have your monitor, again, positioning that monitor so that you can look at the center of the screen or the center of whatever you're working on the most. And so if you have multiple screens, you want to make sure that if you say you're looking at, say, one for 70% of the time, you want that one to be a bit more in your direct line of sight so that you don't have to be looking to the side for 70% of your day. And then in terms of environment, instead, we want to make sure that we have everything kind of set up within the things that we use the most, set up in a nice kind of, call it elbow distance reach. So just from your elbow to your hand. So that would be like your keyboard, your mouse, things like that. So you're not reaching for those items. That's why I find it's really useful if you are using a laptop to get a detached keyboard so that you can then use the laptop as your monitor and the keyboard separately, and you can position both accordingly. And then lastly, again, chair posture-wise, we want to make sure that we're in a good position. So starting with setting that chair up, what we talked about earlier, setting that relative to the desk so that we can start from a good position and then set the rest of our keyboard and everything up around us. Perfect. And so in terms when it comes to the wrist and the hand, we want to make sure that we keep things in line as much as we can. So again, a nice reason why getting a mouse and a detached keyboard is nice is that they are a little bit wider typically, and having the mouse out to the side allows you to keep that wrist angle nice and neutral. I don't know, can you see my little dot there, but you can see the kind of that wrist angle, nice and neutral. We're not kind of doing the typical kind of elbows flared, wrist in close on that laptop, which puts a lot more pressure into the outside of the wrist. The second thing that we want to make sure we're doing is unweighting those wrists, right? So if we pin our wrists on the keyboard or on the table, we tend to move a lot just through that wrist joint rather than actually moving through that whole shoulder. Now, the wrists don't necessarily love kind of going back and forth just in that one position. So by unweighting that wrist, you can kind of move the whole arm. And lastly, we want our arms kind of tucked in by our sides. So we don't want to be reaching way out in front of us. We don't want to have the elbows really flared up like so. We want to be able to kind of just keep those arms nice and relaxed by our side and be able to kind of type away there. And that's where that environment comes in, right? If you use, you're going to use your mouse a lot, but your mouse is way over here, reaching like that all day is not going to be your ideal position. Perfect. So kind of what is optimal posture? I know a lot of people kind of say to me when I'm in the clinic here, like, oh, I've always had poor posture, or I've never had good posture, things like that. But when it really comes down to it, I always like to say like our next posture is our best posture. So the more we move, the better off we are. I know there was a big kind of shift, and I still really love the sit to stand desk in order of being able to adjust and change positions throughout the day. But I like to say, like, just like we talked about with the ball there, if you do a big shift like that from just, sitting all day to standing all day, you may not have the same aches and pains that you did while you're sitting, but they may change, right? Because again, now you're in a different posture, but you're in that posture all day. So it's really about moving, changing positions frequently. That's going to help the body feel good throughout the day. So with that being said, do we have any questions about any of that before we move on to a little bit of movement here? Doesn't look like it. Okay. Perfect. So first of all, a couple things that I like to implement to get a bit more movement throughout your day is start by just trying little movement. It doesn't have to mean that you have to do a full extra bout of exercise every day, right? Like maybe it's just changing your posture throughout your day, taking a little break every hour to do a bit of stretches and some mobility work. If that's the case, I like to make use of natural breaks in your day. So say you're getting up to go to the washroom already, or you're taking a phone call, where you're on a Zoom call where you can kind of turn your video off and you can do some standing stretching and everything like that. That's the big one that I've kind of tried to make use of lately, is really when you can turn the video off and stand up and walk around, or do some movement there. Definitely take advantage of those times. And lastly, you kind of want to make sure that you're setting up for success, right? So you have a workspace that is able to allow you to move. It's set up for your body, and you also have a bit of like a plan of like, okay, this is when I'm gonna, take my breaks, or maybe I'm setting a timer, right? And that's what's gonna help me kind of remember to get up and move, or spitting a sticky note somewhere, things like that, that are just little natural cues, especially as you're trying to form those habits of moving a little bit more. Having those little cues are definitely helpful. Okay, so let's start moving here. I'm going to take you guys through a little bit of, like, I like to call it like a little bit of movement check-in. So we're going to go through a few different things throughout the body, see how we're feeling, and from there we'll start to, when we get into some of the mobility work, I can say, this is really good for X, Y, and Z, depending on what you were feeling there. So Alyssa, are we going to pin? I might already be pinned in terms of speaker view here, but I just want to see whether people can make my screen a little bit bigger there.
They could. Let's see. On this end, we have a different options for viewing. Like you can do standard, speaker, and gallery. If you want to have Adam as a bigger screen, we do have it. So we'd have to unshare the PowerPoint for you to come up like as a huge profile. But currently, you can set it up just to see Adam and the PowerPoint.
Okay. So yeah, let me know, guys. I'll leave the PowerPoint up for now, and if you want it to go bigger, then I will. I can stop my share here so that you can bring it up bigger. But let me know how this works as we kind of get through the first couple movements here, and then we can kind of move things around if we need to. So let's all stand up. And I just want to make sure we can see okay there.
Just a quick note, if you are on speaker view, which you should see on the top right-hand corner, there is a little kind of lever that you can make Adam's video bigger on that view. So you could either pin it or just move it up and down, kind of scrolling it to make it larger.
Perfect. And kind of also just a quick note, as we're going through these things, I don't want anybody to be feeling a lot of pain or anything like that. So if you are feeling any pain with any of these movements, either ask us a quick question or back off that movement. None of these should be painful as you're going through, okay? So first one, kind of just a bit of a neck rotation. We're just going to text out and see how we feel there. So we're going to start by looking towards the floor. Okay, see how that feels. Now I'm going to take my head over to the left shoulder. Good. Looking up towards the roof and over the right shoulder. Good. And then finally bringing us back down to the middle. And then we're going to reverse the direction there. So we're going to go over that right shoulder, up towards the roof, looking over that left shoulder, and back down. Now, as you get more comfortable with that, sometimes I'll do more of like an actual neck circle. And really what we're doing here is like, okay, how do I feel today? Am I tight looking to my left? Does it feel pretty tight as I look down, right? Kind of just using this as a bit of a check-in. And a lot of these things can be used, A, as a check-in, but two, as, okay, this can just be my little bit of mobility flow as I move through some of these things, right? And so then the second thing I want to look at is how are my shoulders feeling, right? So I'm going to take my arm all the way up overhead. From there, I'm going to actually adjust this a little bit so you guys can see my hand. So arms all the way up overhead. In this position, my thumb is facing back. From there, I'm going to rotate my thumb towards the front and start to take that arm behind me. So that as I come back and behind, that the back of my palm kind of reaches my hip. Like so. And then from there, we're going to reverse that direction. We're going to come up as far as you can that way. You're going to turn your thumb again now out, so palm is out. And I'm going to come back up and around over that shoulder. Perfect. And so typically I'll do a few reps of each of these. For time's sake today, I'm just going to kind of go through one to start. And then we're going to check our other side. So how do we feel? We're going to take that arm thumb towards the roof. We're going to go all the way up overhead. Then turn that thumb around, take my arm behind me, bringing that arm back down, and then reversing, lifting that arm up, turning that thumb up, and then bringing it back around. Okay, so that's like kind of that shoulder circle. Okay, again, oh, do I feel stuck up top? Is it harder for me to go into this position? Does it feel really tight back here, right? Like looking at some of those things are going to help guide where you want to spend your time stretching and moving there. Now, the other quick test that I like to do sometimes with clients and is just to see, okay, how is my shoulder mobility overall? Is I'll get people standing against the wall so that my hips, my back, and my head are all against the wall. This is always a good one to try if you have some wall space available. I want you to really think about, I can't get my hand kind of into the small of my back. So that lower back and everything is pressed against the wall, head's against the wall. And then from there, am I able to take both my hands up in front of me and touch my thumbs to the wall? All right, that kind of gives us, okay, do we have enough range in that shoulder? Now, a lot of times that's difficult without, or it will really feel like your back wants to pull off the wall. And that tells us that we need to work a bit more on our ability for our upper back to kind of extend in order to get us into that position. Good. Any questions so far from anyone? How are we all doing? Good, good, good. Okay, and so then with our full body rotation, what we're doing is we're going to face forward. Both our feet are going to be facing forward. I'm going to keep my feet in the exact same spot they are, and then I'm going to rotate my body as much as I can to one side. From there, I'm going to rotate my body as much as I can to the other side. Now, this is sometimes a nice one to do on camera. So what I'm looking for is, can I get my shoulders basically in line? Even maybe, can I see this arm back here starting to pop through, right? That's how much kind of rotation I want to have through that range. All right. The next one we're going to do is our toe touch. So from the side, just bending forward. How does it feel? Can I get my hands on the ground? Can I touch my toes? Where do I feel that? Is it just the hamstring stretch? Is it more into my back? Kind of how does that feel? Okay, perfect. And then the last one I like to use a little bit is just a bit of your squat. So feet wherever is comfortable. You're going to kind of squat down. Okay, how does that feel on my hips? How does that feel on my back? Again, kind of from the side. I just squat down. How do I feel in that position? And so, again, like I was saying, I like to use this as a bit of a check-in. How's my body feeling, right? Sometimes I'll, roll through some of these motions, 5 reps each, and really kind of see how the body's moving. And in the morning is a bit of like a warm-up before I get going for the day. Or just kind of, even you can do bits and pieces of it. Say you've been sitting for a while. Okay, how does my neck feel? Oh yeah, okay, maybe I need to adjust my posture or anything like that. All right, perfect. Yeah, well, I want to let me switch here. Perfect, so we're gonna go through a few different exercises now, geared to different areas of the body. A lot of them I've kind of geared towards your hips and your mid-back, 2 areas that I find quite often to be quite stiff and stuck. So we kind of focused our areas there. Now, with each of them, you should be able to kind of look these up with a quick YouTube search or Google search. I've kind of listed different variations you can see for each one, and we'll try to go through all of them as long as we have time to kind of go through all of them here. But we'll go through them so that you guys get at least a chance to experience them and kind of feel them out and see how they do. Okay, so first one is just we call it cat cow, cat camel. Probably seen it before. Basically, from the side, I'm going to round as much as I can, tuck my chin in towards my chest, and then from there, I'm going to get as nice, tall as I can. Bring my shoulder blades together, pinch them together. And then repeating down and back up. Okay, so this is a nice one I like to do throughout the day. Again, 5 to 10 reps. And it's great because you can do it seated, you can do it standing, you can do it in many different variations. Now, I have one there against the wall. You can do it against the wall, kind of like in the picture there, or sometimes what I'll do it is against the chair, my table. So if you guys can see, I have a bit of a table there. I'll put my hands on that table, and then I can use the table to push away and then pull my hands down into the table and pull my chest forward. And that one just helps to get a bit more leverage and kind of movement through that back. Same idea would be against the wall, but I find using the table is sometimes quite nice because it's always in front of you. And then the last one version just being kind of on your hands and knees there. I'll just show you that one quick for completeness, but basically in this position here, we're going to round through and then drop back down. Perfect. Now, I'll have you guys pick your kind of favorite one there, and let's go through 5 or 10 reps on your own time. If you want to pop your camera on so I can kind of see how things are going, and if you have questions or want to take a look at anything, you can always do that. But I'll give you a few minutes here just to kind of work through your favorite one there and just see how that's feeling. Thanks, perfect. Okay. Now the second one here we're going to go through is something we call thoracic rotation. So basically that just means mid-back rotation, right? And so a few different versions again here. If we do it in a seated position, again, I like to sometimes put my hands on my chest to make sure that I'm actually rotating through my center or through my core, through my rib cage, and not just kind of pulling my shoulders back and forth. From there, I'm going to kind of rotate as far as I can to one direction, and then as far as I can to the other direction. Yeah, and then sometimes even with this one, we'll add a little bit of rotation. So you can bend a little bit and then try to rotate in both directions. And you might feel that feels a little bit different, right? Or if you bend the opposite way and then try to rotate, how does that feel? All right, so again, just trying to get more movement through that mid-back in a variety of ways. Now, just like you do that in seated, we can do it in standing, right? Rotating from one direction, other direction, right? I can bend and then rotate a little bit, really reaching to one side or the other, or even just reaching across like that, trying to get a bit more rotation through that mid-back, okay?
This feels great. I like the pressure kind of.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely a stiff area, especially if you're working on the computer a lot. That mid-back can really get kind of locked down. And I'll show you the last one, like lying kind of like in the photo here, because I do like that one. It looks a little less active. It's a little bit more, you can just relax into that stretch. So if you're on the floor, tucking both your knees up so that we're kind of at 90 degrees, hands up in front of you, right? And then you're gonna either open up like so. And again, I'm kind of running out of room here, just in one of our treatment rooms, so don't have enough room to kind of rotate all the way through. Or if you want, you can always put your arm kind of like on your rib cage, and sometimes I find this nice as well. Just trying to rotate back like so. Think about pulling that hand kind of on the rib cage, and then I can just take some breaths here. And that again, getting some movement through there can help some of those tissues relax and get a little bit more range. So again, let's pick our favorite one there, and then just kind of work through a little bit. And just do, again, maybe 5 to 10 reps aside. with this one, I do like I kind of said on the last one, I like to tie in some of the breathing. So if you rotate, take a nice breath in, exhale, and then come back. And then rotating the opposite way, breath in, exhale, and come back. Perfect. Awesome. All right, let's go on to the next one here. So again, these ones are great to open up through the chest and through kind of the upper back. Again, a good one when we did that test earlier. Okay, how did that feel? If I felt really stiff, now that I've worked that mid back a little bit, if I retest that, do I feel a little bit looser, right? And if you do, then that's a good indication that you're a little bit stiff through that mid back, and then we need to kind of work in that area. But the other thing that could be tight there is a bit in our actual shoulders. And so one of the ones I like to do against the wall, again, you're basically going to go into that same position, arms out to the side, and you're going to try to keep your arms on the wall, come up over your head, and back down. Just like you're making a big snow angel. Yeah, and now you can do this with your arms straight, like so, or you can do it with your arms bent. And so trying to pull down into this position, and then back up. Now, I like this one because you're basically opening up through the chest a lot. You're getting a little bit of work through some of those muscles in the shoulder blades, often to like a combo that we find tight through the front, not as strong through the back. But overall, that's like something that can kind of hit both of those areas. All right. Questions on either of those? Just looking through the chat there. Yeah, a little bit stiff. Yeah. Oops. Let's go back there. Perfect. So again, let's take a few minutes. Let's kind of try to go through a few. Up against the wall, and then up and down. Now you can really do this one kind of like, the picture, they're kind of in the chair, but also against the wall. Like if I was in my chair, I could lean back against my chair, just kind of open the arms up like so, and then try to do that same motion. Doesn't necessarily have to be against the wall, as long as I'm thinking about squeezing the shoulder blades back and together throughout there. Okay. So we're going to move on to the hips now. Now, this is kind of totally kind of an extreme version of this stretch. There's lots of variations of this stretch. So if you ever look up World's Greatest Stretch, you'll probably see a bunch of different kind of versions of it. It's a great one to open up the hips, also get some rotation in through the back. So I'll kind of show you guys the first version that I like to work with. So we're going to come down. You're going to come down into kind of a long lunge position. 1 foot forward, bring that down a little bit more. And 1 foot back, like so. I'm going to try to drop my hips towards the floor as much as I can. So from the front, looks like this, right? Hands are on the inside of my knee. And then from there, I can add a bit of rotation. So I can reach up towards the roof, right? With that arm, I can reach up towards the roof with the other arm. Right, so adding a bit of rotation and that arm reach. I can try to do the opposite rotation. So instead of reaching that arm up, can I get that arm down? Can I get that elbow towards the ground? And that's really going to kind of try to open up that hip a bit more, right? You can also go with a reach overhead, right? So can I just get both arms up overhead this way and really open up the front of that hip flexor, keeping everything engaged through there? And then the kind of last version is the one they're doing there, where they're here. Can you get your bit of that quad stretch at the same time? Now, this one's really, really tough. It's also kind of going to put a lot of pressure on the knee. So not my first go-to. Sometimes I find easier either putting your foot on the wall or against your chair can help with that. And then you don't have to reach your arm so far back. right? So I can have my foot up against the wall, or if I have my desk chair, foot up on the chair, and then I get a bit more of that quad stretch as I'm in that position. And I don't have to be up and reaching back and grabbing my foot and kind of putting more stress on that knee.
Could you also put one of those foam blocks from yoga under your knee?
Yeah, definitely. That could work well. Sometimes I'll even take a bit of a variation of this and like won't work so well with my chair here, and sometimes with desk chairs wouldn't work, especially if they're on wheels. But if you have like say you're on a firm dining chair and you have a cushion on the bottom, sometimes what I'll do is you can hold onto the wall, you can pop yourself on there, and then you can do it in a standing position. You don't have to get down on the floor. You can still really open up the front of the hip that way, right? That same thing kind of goes for the stretch in general, right? I don't necessarily have to be on the floor. I can just take a nice big kind of split stance, gauge my core, take that big reach up overhead, rotate my arms out to one side, and still get that nice stretch through the front of the hip as I reach through those positions without being on my kind of hands and knees there as well. So take a second, guys, try that one. Whatever variation you kind of want to go through there, depending on what's feeling a bit tight. And let's do about 5 reps, maybe on each side here, just to get things moving a little. Okay. So the next one that I like to work on, figure 4, it's a glute stretch, opens up the back of your hip. So lots, again, versions of this that you can do. The easiest one I like to do is seated, because we're always kind of sitting in the chair, but you're just basically going to have feet on the ground, take one leg, cross it over the other, and then from there, you're going to try to sit up nice and tall. And this is where I feel it often goes wrong. People will just kind of hang out like this. And you'll notice once we get into that stretch a bit more, if you're kind of in that rounded back position, you're not going to get nearly as much stretch as if you straighten up your back and stay nice and tall there. Okay, so nice and tall, you can either push on the knee to get a bit of a stretch there, right? Or pull that knee up towards your opposite shoulder. Or if I can keep my back nice and straight, I can hinge forward towards that leg, keeping that back straight. And then I should feel that in that glute that of the leg that's crossed over. All right. So a few different ways you can do that one. You'll notice if you're doing this one where you're hinged forward and you just kind of round the back, that stretch kind of goes away quite a bit, right? So it's kind of important to keep that back nice and straight as you're doing that. Again, this can be done in a few different ways, right? We can do it seated, we can do it lying down. So the one against the wall, I like to sometimes, if I'm not feeling like using my arms, just put my leg up like so. Again, I can kind of inch my way closer to the wall to get a bit more of a stretch, and then I can just hang out this way. So that's always a nice one there. And then the last one, again, you can also do it hands and knees. So cross that one leg over, drop down like so, and again, stretching into the back of the hip there. So lots of options on this one. They're all trying to target the back of the hip. Again, an area that often gets quite tight, sitting a lot of the day. Perfect. Now with that, sorry?
I was going to say, some of the stretches do even feel easier on the hip if you have that tightness.
Yeah.
This is easy, but then when I'm trying to put some pressure on my leg, I can feel a bit more tension.
Yeah. So sometimes, yeah, you need that like a little bit of overpressure or that little bit of like added movement to tighten up the system and actually get that stretch there. That's definitely true. Yeah, so those are kind of a few options there. again, take a minute, just kind of work on that one area that feels a bit tighter there. And then we'll go into one of our last ones, I think, for today.
What is this one called, where your one leg is on top of the other and you push down?
I call it a figure 4 stretch, or a glute, figure 4 glute stretch. If you look up figure 4, the idea is that if you, and I might be backwards here, but
yes.
If I take my leg, it kind of looks like a 4. And so I think that's why they kind of call it that. But it really is just trying to get the back of the hip there. Perfect. All right. So the last one, kind of downward dog. If you've done a lot of yoga, you'll kind of know this one. I like it to get the hamstrings, to get the upper back, kind of lats, everything. So it's definitely a nice one to use. We'll show you kind of on the floor, but I'll also show you against the wall or against the table, because sometimes that's a little bit easier and it can bias a bit more upper back than hamstrings. So for the one on our floor, you're just taking a nice comfortable position, feet on the floor. We're going to kind of push our head through a little bit, try to drop those heels towards the floor. Now, I might get a stretch here anywhere from my calves into my hamstrings, but I find it's a little bit more difficult to feel the stretch like into your upper back, unless you're quite flexible, and then that's a kind of easier position for you to get into. So what I like to do against the table is then I'll kind of come down here, hands on the table, and then can I push my head through that way? And that will almost bias a bit more of your lats and your back, upper back there, than your hamstring. And yeah, you can do this from the knees, like kind of like as I'm doing now. If your table's not high enough, if your table is higher, you could also just do hands against there. And kind of same thing goes for the wall. So with the wall, you can just go hands on the wall and then pushing that head through. So you find like a lot of the ones I like to do end up having, arms overhead or trying to extend the back. It's just a matter of trying to get ourselves out of that kind of flex position that we end up spending a lot of the day in inheritably. So just by getting those arms like up overhead, it forces you kind of to be into that position a little bit. So if you're spending some time in that position, or in that world's greatest stretch with your arms overhead, or different things like that, just to open up a bit more, I find that it's a good way to. It's almost like you're getting two benefits, right? You're getting the mobility work, but you're also getting your less time spent in that flex position, right? So that's why it's great to use these things as like a bit of a break throughout the day, but also can be used just as like a bit of like a warm up for whatever movement or activity you're going to about to do. Perfect. Any questions on any of the stretches that we kind of went through there? Perfect. Okay. Oh, we have a couple more. I forgot that I added these two in here last minute. So the last two that we're going to do a bit again for the hips. So we're going to do some squat variations and then something called a 90-90 hip rotation. So the first one with the squat, pretty simple. Just going to get down into like a comfortable squat. If you can keep your heels on the ground, great. Now I find sometimes this is tough, so you might need to hang onto your table a little bit to have a little bit of a counterbalance there, so that you don't feel like you're going to fall over. Now, just hanging out in this position can be nice because you're letting your back kind of just relax. You might even feel like you get a bit of a stretch in your back here just from kind of hanging out in this position. Good. The other thing you can do here is open up our hips a little. So I get my elbows kind of like in the photo, and you just drive your elbows into your knees here. We can feel like we're opening up through the adductors there. Now this is sometimes a bit more of a a difficult position to get into, depending on your mobility, but get a nice one there. And then lastly, you can always try to like, okay, can I rock a little bit on one knee? Can I rock a little bit on the other knee? Get a bit of a stretch through my ankle here. But I find the one I use the most like throughout the day sometimes is just this guy, just kind of hanging out here. You can still do those rocks side to side, and it just adds a little bit by having a bit of that counterbalance. You can really just be a bit more comfortable there, not feel like you're working as hard, get a bit of that stretch into the hips. Okay, and then the last one I want to go over is a bit of this 90-90 hip rotation. So the reason we call it 90-90 is that our knees and hips are all going to be in 90-degree angles. So I'm going to take my feet like so. I'm going to try to get my front knee in a 90-degree angle between my two legs. I'm trying to get a 90-degree angle. And in my back knee, I'm trying to get a 90-degree angle. So you're just making a bunch of boxes there. Now in this position, hands behind you to help kind of stabilize. You want to try, okay, can I sit into my back leg, try to get that hip towards the floor? A lot of times that'll feel pretty pinchy or tight, maybe into the front of the hip or even through the inside of the leg here. And then you can also look, okay, if I want to bias my front leg, can I rotate my belly button towards that front leg? And again, try to lean forward that way. And I should feel that a bit more in that front hip. Okay, so those are kind of two ways to get a bit of a stretch out of it. Now, the active rotations are also nice to kind of work some of those muscles there. I'll use this one a bit more as like a warm-up for my activities. But you're basically going to try to keep your feet where they are. You're going to lift that back leg up a little bit, start to rotate over, take that front leg over, and then back down to them. You should, if you're kind of doing it right, we should be about almost 90-90 in the opposite direction now. All right. And then working back over the other way. Good. Now, if you want to challenge yourself here, you're going to try to get your hands off the ground, nice and tall, keeping your hands up. And then can you rotate through that position, keeping your hands up? So again, this is a nice one to get those hip rotators working. You know, a lot of times we spend doing stuff just in a sitting or standing or walking position. We're all in that kind of same plane. We don't do a lot of rotation back and forth. So getting a lot of these muscles moving in some of those other areas can be a great one. Okay. Any questions on any of those?
Is it normal for you to get some cracks here and there in your knees?
Some cracks in the knees. So, I mean, ideally, I don't want you feeling anything in the knee, like not painful in the knee. We can play with your foot position for that, or maybe your knee, how much you are bending there. But yeah, getting some creaks and cracks is totally okay. You're not used to being in those positions. That's totally fine. I'm just reading through the chat here. Great transition to say it's best for lower back pain, mostly working from the couch. Yeah, so the ones I would focus on for lower back, I would probably do a combination of a bit of that squat stretch, right? Or even like a child's pose, same kind of idea. And then a bit of that world's greatest stretch to open up the front of the hip. And then any kind of the thoracic movement that we did. A lot of the times we find, I mean, again, it's hard to say without actually, looking at you and seeing what's going on. But I also often find that people, especially if we're working from the desk a lot, we're stiff up into our mid back, we're stiff like into the front of the hip. And then so what happens is that lower back will often, to sit up straight, we end up almost like cranking on all those muscles here through our lower back, right? And so they get really tight and tired at the end of the day, right? Or vice versa, if you're too slouched here, then you're always lengthening and you feel like you get that compression through there as well, right? So if we can get the area above and the area below to move a bit better and have a bit more options, then typically now when I sit up straight, I can actually extend through my upper back and I don't have to extend through my lower back, and actually keeps my back feeling a little bit happier, right? Same thing kind of goes with the hip. So typically I'll start there, like looking above and below, and can we loosen some of those areas off to decrease some of the tension in that lower back. Great. Okay, and so kind of on that note, we'll go through a little bit of, I have a couple slides here just on like injury prevention, injury risk. Obviously, kind of, some of the biggest things is, making sure you're warming up, making sure you can move before going into that exercise. I know a lot of people have kind of switched to home workouts, myself included. Been doing a lot of home workouts, doing a lot of running, way more running than I've been doing this last year than probably ever. So I know that's kind of the common trend, and people have been switching a lot to that. And we are seeing some things of like, oh yeah, my knees are bothering me, or things like that, as people start to move in that direction. Now, the biggest things that we typically find when I look at injury risk is I'm looking at biomechanics, or how you move, like what's your exercise technique like, what's your running form look like, or training errors. And that being like, okay, are you doing too much too soon? Are you all of a sudden going from running, never to running 3 times a week at 5K, like things like that? Are we adding too much volume too soon? Is there any planning in your workouts? Are you just picking a, workout off YouTube every day, and maybe that week, every single workout you picked was all training quads or something, or all training a certain thing, right? And there's no overall plan throughout the week, and now we're just overloading that tissue system, or we're overloading that one area too much, right? And sometimes we combine these together, you already don't have the best technique, or we're missing something in that regard, and now we're loading on a ton of volume on it, and it's just kind of like that recipe for injury, right? Now, we can't 100% say with certainty that we're able to stop or mitigate all these injury risks, right? There's a lot of screens and tools out there, and the evidence isn't 100% that, yeah, if you can do X, Y, and Z, you'll never get injured, right? It's not necessarily that black and white, but we can do as much as we can to prepare our bodies and make sure we're moving in the right ways to hopefully try to limit that as much as possible. So kind of some of the areas I could say, like we said, mobility work or moving your body, making sure you have the actual range of motion to do the exercise. So as an example of that, say, my shoulders are really tight, I sit and I work a lot. I can't really get my arm overhead here. Like that's kind of about as much as I can do. But I'm going to go ahead and do my workout for today. I have some dumbbells at home, and I'm just going and I'm pressing overhead a whole bunch, right? Now, in this position, I'm loading up that shoulder, I'm loading up that neck a lot more, right? Gravity's acting kind of downward here. So I'm putting a lot more force through that shoulder than if I was to be able to get here. Now gravity acts through my whole arm, and it's actually all stacked over top, right? And so the likelihood of me kind of irritating my rotator cuff or things like that kind of goes down a little bit. But maybe I can't actually get there, right? So maybe I need to do some more of my mobility against the wall or things like that to help increase my biomechanics or my ability to get into that position. And now I can do my presses overhead. So if that was your case, maybe you would do some of those drills that we worked on in the mobility flow there as a bit of your warm up for that exercise. And then you go ahead and you kind of work through there if you can, right? That's just kind of an example of how you'd kind of blend some of the mobility and warm up stuff with the training that you're already doing. You want to make sure like in your warm up that you're A, kind of getting your heart rate going a little bit, but B, also starting to move those things, say for example, your shoulder, you're going to use your shoulders a lot. You want to make sure you're moving that as a warm up to get things moving there. All right. Now I wanted to run through things here, but I know I want to look at our time. We're running close on time here as well. So we'll run through these really quickly, and just then we'll make sure we leave a couple minutes. A lot of movements and exercises are made up of like a squat pattern, like some kind of plank pattern, and some kind of row or push-up pattern, right? If you're lunging, you're basically like a one-leg squat. If you're doing a jump, you're still squatting. In your push-up, even you have to hold a plank. If you're rowing or doing anything like that, you need to have your shoulder in a good position. So the biggest things, keys-wise here, I always like to say with your squat, people say, oh, should I squat this low or squat this high, or my knees over my toes or anything like that? My kind of quick cue for that is your foot should always feel like it's balanced. So if you're standing on your feet and I'm going into my squat and all of a sudden my weight shifts forward and my heels come up, now my foot's not balanced. That's an extreme example, but now I'm loading up my knees a whole bunch more. So if I can keep my foot balanced, and even as I come down, keep that nice balanced feeling, the likelihood that I'm gonna go either too deep in my squat or anything like that for my mobility, it goes down, right? Because you're just going by the limits of your natural biomechanics. plank, this one, caveat, this is not the best, this is not a great plank. You can see quite an arch in the lower back there. We don't want to see that. We want to see a nice neutral back. So kind of like in here, you can see that nice line there. That's what we would like to see. So a lot of times, this is what I see a lot is people are like, yeah, I'm hanging out my plank and my back's killing me. Like, yeah, well, you're hanging out like basically on your ligaments here. You're not using a lot of core musculature, and that lower back is just taking all the load, right? So that's something to stay away from. With the row and the push-up, this one actually looks not bad, right? Shoulders in a nice position, elbows in a good position. But the biggest thing I see there is in both motions, people like to let that shoulder come forward. So if I'm rowing, I want to make sure I'm pulling that whole shoulder blade back, not letting this happen where that shoulder kind of dips forward here. And now I'm putting a lot more stress on the front of that shoulder. Same goes if I was doing a push-up, imagine my hands are on the ground, I'm coming down, I want everything to come with me. I don't want to all of a sudden be here. Now my neck's all tight, I've got more pressure on the front of the shoulder, and I've kind of loaded up that shoulder in a not ideal way. That's just really cool notes on there. If you do have more questions, you can always shoot me an email or come pop in and we can go through some stuff. But I just wanted to make sure we kind of threw a little bit in there and also left a little bit of time for questions here. So if you do have questions, please go ahead, pop them in the chat box or turn on your video and you can go ahead and ask away. Thanks, guys.
Take you off mute if you'd like.
So stretches for running. Yeah, I mean, the big ones I would use like that world's greatest stretch that we did. So really opening up the front of the hip, particularly if you sit a lot, right? That hip gets tight, we go to stand up. This is obviously an exaggeration. I can't really fully extend my hip. I extend my back. I'm not getting great, because I can't extend my hip, I'm not getting a lot of use out of my glute. So I get really tight through my quad as I'm pushing off there. So you can open up the front of that hip. That's a great one to start to at least get you into some hip extension so that we can actually push through the glutes, right, as you're running there, so that we're not quite so tight through the front. That's kind of my first go-to. Anything like in a lunging position or anything like that is great to help kind of work the outside of the hip. So if you're trying to targeting that outside of the hip, that's another area that you'd want to kind of do in terms of strengthening for running. Bad to sit cross-legged. I mean, some people might say it's bad to sit cross-legged. I would probably say if you have the requisite mobility, it's probably not that bad, right? I find it actually, and sometimes I should have mentioned this, but like, I'll sometimes work from the floor because then I can sit cross-legged and it gives me a bit more stability through my pelvis so that my back doesn't have to turn on quite so much because I'm kind of screwing my hips into a position that locks my pelvis in place, right? And so then I'll work on the floor. So obviously not all day because it's not the best to sit on the floor, but as a bit of a mix-up. So if you're able to sit in that position, now I just want to see if we can get that there without, if you're here and you're like this because you're so tight, I would say, it's probably not the best idea for you to sit cross-legged all day because you're just rounding through your back a ton, right? Or if you're here and your like knees are really high up and you're kind of like something like this, like, yeah, maybe not the best idea. But if you can comfortably sit here with a nice neutral back, no tension anywhere, totally, I don't see why that would be too much of a problem unless you're developing some kind of hip issue or something in your knees, then we might have to look at that. But as a general, okay, I don't have any pains or anything like that, you'd probably be okay.
Well, I also wanted to do prize draw as well for our...
Yes, sorry for taking up so much time there.
This was fantastic. I think we got a lot of really great information. And of course, this will be available to everyone afterwards as well, because that was a lot and you're going to want to refresh.
Yeah. And yeah, just like I said, because it was a lot, if you do have questions, my email's here. If you want to come see us, we are, like I said, downtown. We are open, taking the in-person class with all our COVID protocols there. But if you just want to shoot me a question, like totally open to that anytime. Shoot me an email and I'd love to answer any questions that you had about anything.
Oh, probably very helpful. Okay, we'll do this quick prize draw. And I will use the cool spin the wheel of names on that end. And then whoever wins, just shoot me a quick email at vanexec@sfu.ca, and good luck. Just sport checks. Maybe you can get a foam roller or something kind of fun on that end. So we have Laurel was just here.
I think Laura left. Yeah.
Should we draw again or?
Yeah. Spin again.
Okay. We do it one more time. Oh.
Lori here.
Can you check for me? My screen is now an entire spin the wheel. I think she might have left as well. No.
Her name still seems
Yeah,
to
I
be
see
on.
Lori Williams. Yeah, Lori is here. Yeah, Lori is the winner. So.
Well, Lori, if you could, I can also email you on that end. I have all your details on our registration page. So I will reach out to you and give you your $25 gift card to Sport Check on that end. So hopefully you'll get something nice to help you continuously work out. And if you guys mind just stay for a quick minute, and if you'd like to be on a photo, we would love to take a screenshot so we can save these memories of what COVID was like during these crazy times. You don't have to be in it. You can leave the Zoom call. You can leave your video off. But in about 5 seconds, I'll take the screenshots. If you want to turn a video on or anything like that, big smiles.